A very good morning again to absolutely everyone who's joined us for today. Thank you very much, so much for joining us for ICDM's SME webinar series. And thank you very much for taking your time out of your day to join us and equip yourself with tools to navigate our current crazy world. And if you're actually Malaysian, we are officially now into day 2 of the recovery phase. And I believe you, not to quote a song, but it is feel like a brand new world. Before we start actually today, I've got a couple of housekeeping rules for you, for those of you who have missed the early announcement. As you can see that your mic is automatically muted when you join, but don't worry, there's ways of contacting us. On the Zoom tab, there are 2 tabs. One is the Q&A and one is the chat. Questions for our speaker actually go into the Q&A tab. We'll answer them at the end of his session. But if you're having any technical difficulties or you have any questions, or in fact, you just want to learn more about the series in general, there's the chat box next to you. Feel free to drop us a chat. Please tell us which organization you are from and your name as well. This entire session is actually recorded and we will send you a copy after that. And without further, and of course, And of course, if you wish to leave the webinar at any point, you can, but you'll be able to rejoin if it is still in progress. And with that, welcome again. Today we welcome Shankar R. Sathiram, Executive Leadership Coach and Managing Consultant of EQTD Consulting Malaysia. If he sounds familiar when he starts speaking, he actually has a daily radio segment on Light Malaysia called The Right Perspective with Shankar Sathiram. Since 2016, he also writes a weekly column called Work Matters every Friday in the business section of the New Straits Times. And if you actually want him to in long form, in June 2016, he actually released a book saying, "So You Want to Get Promoted?" And this is distributed via MPH distribution. And there's other businesses as well that he has, which are actually quite interesting. There's a stand-up comedy club, which I am very interested in, and a restaurant. But that aside, his topic today is called The Mindset to Adopt During a Crisis. I do actually think that in this day and age, when this crisis hit, a lot of us had this knee-jerk reaction of just curling up into a fetal position. And that's not even an insult, it's just human instinct. But mental fortitude, I think, is very important in times like this. I'm a big advocate for that, and I think more than can be done. But saying that, that's enough of my views on this topic. I hand it over to Shankar to actually tell you his presentation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I do hope that you can all hear me. If the secretariat, the people who are involved in the setting up, can just give me a thumbs up, I know that I can be heard. A lovely introduction and a very good morning to all of you out there. I understand there's about 60 or 70 of you who are corporate directors from SMEs and also other organizations, and I have been invited. Thank you very much to thank you, excellent. You can hear me. Thanks very much, Michelle. The Institute of Corporate Directors Malaysia, and also Nadia for hosting this particular webinar, free webinar series. And today my topic is called what I would like to talk to you about and share ideas about is the mindset to adopt during a crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a crisis. That's absolutely the only way to describe the current situation that we are all in. When we negotiate ourselves as we work through this entire crisis period, I think what we need to understand right at the beginning is that there are a few things that we need from ourselves. I'm not going to talk about the governmental help that's available and that you need right now, the helping hand from your professional bodies and institutional institutional organizations that will help companies, so on and so forth. I'm talking about what we need to do as entrepreneurs, as directors of companies, as SMEs, the steps that we need to take in terms of recalibrating our own minds and our own way of thinking and seeing this particular problem. Essentially, this particular webinar is going to talk about having a determined self-belief and not being stuck with a fixed mindset. Right? That's something that we all need to explore in ourselves right now. Gain from all the valuable experiences that you have had over the years or months or decades that you have been conducting your businesses and being in employment, being an employee, and then being a line leader, and then eventually being a director of a company. Engage your employees effectively right now. It is important for us to understand how we should engage our employees right now and not just treat them the way we perhaps used to treat them in the past. Look at opportunities, be an explorer, and far more important from all of that is to enable a mindset inside yourself which allows you to open yourself up. Open yourself up to experiences, open yourself up to ideas, and it is time to incorporate other people's viewpoints and adopt an entrepreneurial attitude. That's essentially what we are going to be talking about today. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, in entrepreneurship, you have to come to terms with the fact that there is absolutely no certainty in anything that you do. The life of a business owner is fraught with regular unpredictability, and you are being taught, or have been taught, or I have been taught essentially that you need to be continuously prepared and be ready for any eventuality. That's vital, right? As an entrepreneur, that's the first thing that we learn. That's the first thing that we experience. That is essentially the first thing. The baptism of fire literally is for us to come to terms with the fact that we need to be continuously prepared and that we need to be ready for all sorts of eventualities. And this particular COVID-19 pandemic crisis that not only Malaysia is seeing, but the whole world is experiencing, should essentially be slightly easier, for example, for entrepreneurs rather than salaried people to manage, simply because we are supposed to be continuously prepared and that we have to be ready for all eventualities. But the reality is, many people are not prepared. Many of you sitting out there are not prepared to the extent of what has happened. You might have been prepared to some extent. You might have tried to mitigate your difficulties to some extent, but we find ourselves in a massive quandary today, in a big dilemma, because primarily the entrepreneurial spirit is that usually in companies that you are managing as an SME, or if you have started a particular organization, is that no matter how difficult times become and all the fraught difficulties that you might be faced with, at the end of the day, you will be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel. You'll be able to see some semblance of how to navigate yourself through the complexities of your particular organization or even your career. Right now, so many people are not being able to see that light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of organizations are really struggling. Now, for example, if we take the most vulnerable in our society, vulnerable organizations, not just individuals who are displaced, but the most vulnerable businesses in our society are the businesses that are startups, are the businesses that perhaps provide what the public doesn't see as an essential service. Just a simple example, if you're a restaurant, if all this while you've been doing all right, you've been doing quite decent numbers, you will find that the movement control order, the CMCO, the conditional movement control order, and right now in day 2 of our recovery movement control order, all of this is actually applying tremendous pressure because people are still reticent about coming out and participating in a particular restaurant, going and eating outside. Is it safe for myself? Can I take my family out? And also there are lots and lots of, as company directors, there are lots and lots of confusing rules and regulations that are regularly being presented to us. So you can't really see clearly how to navigate the uncertainties of your careers and your enterprises at the moment. In my work life, unfortunately, I have had to deal with such unexpected circumstances quite often over the last 25 years of being in business, because I'm always trying to be at the cutting edge of new businesses. For example, in the 1990s, I decided to venture out from being a practicing lawyer, which I was, to leave my legal career and to move on to becoming an educationist. Of course, my parents were both educationists. My mother was a school teacher. My father was a university professor. So I kind of grew up in that particular environment. And I thought, oh, what I can do is I can run these colleges that I see mushrooming all over the place much better. But my expertise was law. My expertise was human resources management, to some extent, marketing. That's what I knew and that's what I'd learned. But I decided that that's not the way to go. For the future, I need to open, for example, an engineering college or an IT institution, and that's what I did. But it was fraught with difficulty because I didn't know exactly what to do. I was much younger. I didn't have a strong support network, and I had very few people who believed in me at that particular time. So I had to deal with a lot of hardship, right? All sorts of unexpected circumstances. I found myself in the unenviable situation of not being able to pay my bills or even my employees. That's very, very hard. I've even had banks and creditors pressuring me relentlessly. But I tell you now, in 25 years, I'm almost 50 years old, and I experienced all of this essentially from the age of 25 to 35. And 15 years later, now that I'm 50, I realized that the only way I managed to overcome these challenges is by a sense of determined self-belief. There's always been a sense of self-belief in what I do. I've always believed very, very strongly that what I do is relevant. What I do is an essential service for some people. It's never for everyone, but for some people, and with a little bit of help from my friends, my family, and those people who I managed to convince about my ideas, which means who understood my ideas, I was able to surmount these problems. And this is what all entrepreneurs need to do right now. You need to develop that determined self-belief for yourself. Determined self-belief is, first ask yourself, what are you selling? What are you doing? What is your company actually providing? What relevancy do you have in today's post-pandemic world or recovering pandemic world? And then we will have a post-pandemic world after that. The world is changing. If you look at the history books, if you are old enough, I don't think many people are old enough, but if you were born in the 1920s or 1930s, and if you still remember, and I've spoken to some older people who are in their late 70s and early 80s right now, they remember two versions of the world. One before the Second World War and one immediately after the Second World War. Essentially, that period was a watershed period in people's lives because you lived a particular way before, and after the war, you lived another particular way, and that became the norm. We, all of us directors, we are running companies right now because we are still kind of building on the blocks that those of our forefathers and our ancestors, our parents, the people who came before us, who ran organizations in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we've just taken that same principles and same ideals and we've built on it and modernized them and come up with new management ideas in terms of how we can actually present and iterate ourselves, right? That's what we've done. But that particular impulse, that particular experience that people had at that time is what we are facing right now, because literally we didn't have 4 or 5 years of a world war, but we had an intense 3 months over the last 12 weeks or so, where we have suddenly seen a massive shift in terms of consumer preferences, in terms of how people go about their lives, in terms of what we are allowed to do for recreation, in terms of travel, interstate, local travel, international travel, in terms of free movement of goods and services. These are all the things that are going to affect us. And I think to a very large extent, we need to be prepared for a post-pandemic world. I don't know. I mean, we're all still speculating as to when a vaccine will be found. And I think it's pure speculation right now. And it's a futile exercise for you to think that everything will go back to normal, because business literally won't be as usual anymore. And that's something that you need to understand, no matter what you're doing in terms of businesses. So you can actually become quite depressed and quite upset about what's going on in the world right now, or you can develop the determined self-belief that I'm asking you to think about as a leader of an organization. Look out for help from people who are who have a get up and go attitude. I mean, like, one of the things I've done over the last 3 months is basically we've all been stuck at home. We haven't been able to travel and go out. The movement control order and even the conditional movement control order put a certain amount of lockdown on us. But what I did was there was a lot of self-reflection at the time, and one part of that self-reflection that I did was about who I want to hang around with when the pandemic is over. Firstly, and of course, we meet people online. We meet, we try and have little gatherings without breaking the laws. We sit apart for 2 meters apart. And now that, they relaxed the laws almost a month ago, by the 4th of May, restaurants were being allowed to have dine-ins and so on. I had a choice of meeting people. And again, I made the active choice as a leader of about 5 or 6 organizations right now that I'm not going to waste my time with just people who drain my energy. I actually want to be with people who give me a sense of buoyancy, because that is literally the help that you need right now. You need the right people around you, right? And the right people who are able to inspire you, to somewhat inspire you and somewhat engage you to think about things in a different manner, right? Valuable experiences. These situations have literally taught me lessons about the volatility of life. Haven't you realized that? Over the last 3 months, a lot of volatility. I mean, Nadia alluded to the fact that I have a restaurant. I have a restaurant called the Fire Grill. It's not a promotion for the restaurant in Damatun, but what I want to say is, over the 12 weeks, I managed to raise with my team 62,630 ringgit to give out 10,003 free meals. 2 days ago, on the 9th of June, we finished our last meals initiative program. We had given out 10,003 meals to the most displaced in our society. These are refugees, orphanages, people who are physically challenged, handicapped, individual families that were struggling with putting food on the table. And during the 3-month movement control order, CMCO, and now RMCO period, I have been a little bit fortunate because I've been able to go, because of the work that I do, go and distribute. And every time I go out and give something to people on the streets, in various organizations and orphanages and stuff, I've realized that you and I possibly are fairly lucky because we still have a roof over our head and we can put food on the table, by and large, right? And there are so many people out there who are completely displaced. In Bahasa Malaysia, they say, kais pagi makan pagi, kais petang makan petang, because they're hand to mouth, and day wage earners and stuff like that. The volatility of life, the volatility of the economics of the world is questionable right now, right? So we need to prepare ourselves, and for that, you must know that when you have no direction, when you lack inner strength as a leader of an organization, when you are profoundly unprepared, which is what a lot of people have realized that they are, you will struggle. You will fail to be able to separate the trees from the forest. You won't be able to see the real needs and navigate through the complexities of what you're doing. My relative success today, and I'm not hugely successful, I mean, radio show and newspaper column and book and everything else, that's because I keep churning out things. That's what's important to me. But whatever relative success I have today is because of the experiences I've had. My failures have forced me to truly understand what lack of direction does to you, what lack of inner strength does to you, and what happens when you are profoundly unprepared. The suggestion I'm making to all of you SME leaders out there, and also all directors of companies out there who are joining me in this webinar, is you might want to take some heed to these ideas and put them into practice and try working them through. Okay, I'm not trivializing your problems. I'm not being callous when I say this, meaning, I don't know what dramas that you are facing in your own company, in the people that you manage and lead, you yourself as an employee with a larger board of directors. I really don't know what you personally face, but don't concentrate on the problem. Don't lose personal motivation. That's important. These two things are things that are not taught in business and management books, right? Concentration on, if people talk to you about various ways of dealing with the problem, but concentrating on the problem means your mind and your vibrational qualities in your head in terms of what you are able to do and willing to do and how you can actually muster up the courage to manage things are focused in the wrong direction because you're only concentrating on problems. That doesn't mean don't look at problems, don't understand the problems. You must look at the problem, you must understand the problem, but don't carry the problem, put it in your head for longer than required, because many of you will be having sleepless nights about how you're going to pay your staff salaries, how you're going to manage your businesses, for example, right? And along that process of concentrating a lot on your problems, you will find that you lose personal motivation. You will end up going like, is this what I want to do? Why am I doing this? It's all so difficult. I better throw in the towel. You know what I mean? I better walk away from this problem. No, instead, put into practice this. Seek out opportunities. Constantly seek out opportunities. And for that, continue to be motivated and deliberately take action to be motivated, right? Which means deliberately say, I'm going to be buoyed today. I'm going to find a way to do things and force yourself down the road of, it sounds cliched, right? Force yourself down the road of some positivism rather than concentrating on all the mountainous, gargantuan tasks that you have. You need to be motivated. So search for inspiration rather than dwelling on lost opportunities. You need to be able to look for opportunities in a crisis. You will be inspired and be inspirational to others. I want to go back to my restaurant, right? So March the 18th, when they announced the lockdown, they announced a few days before, the government said March the 18th. I thought, okay, it's going to be a trouble. I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a month, we can survive. We didn't realize how long it's going to go. 3 months, literally, is what we've all had to deal with. Right? When the lockdown happened on the 18th of March, I have a restaurant with about 12 staff. And I thought, I can manage this for 2 weeks. We'll manage, figure something out, we'll manage. A week into lockdown, I suddenly realized that, the situation is a lot more serious than what I had anticipated, more than anything else. Profoundly unprepared, But right away, I got into that worry mode, which, concentrating on the problem. And I was beginning to lose a little bit of motivation. And I also realized that my team was beginning to lose a bit of motivation. So I had to dig deep and figure out, and I sat in this particular room in my home, in my office, and said, what can I do? What should I do? How can I look for opportunities in this particular crisis? And how can I be inspired? And perhaps how can I inspire other people? And I thought the biggest thing that we need right now is there are so many people who are displaced in our society. I have the Comedy Club. I have EQTD Consulting, which is a management training outfit. I do leadership coaching, online stuff, right? But really, in this moment, all of that wasn't important. The Comedy Club wasn't so important. We went online and we did a range of comedy shows online. The EQTD Consulting, the consulting work that I do, not so important at that time, right? Now it is because we're in recovery mode. But at that time, people were being displaced and people had no food, and news reports were coming out. There were refugees who hadn't eaten for 2 days and 3 days because they couldn't go to couldn't go to supermarkets, and convenience shops were closed, and there were certain areas that were put under enhanced management control, movement control, and so on. And I looked at this, and I looked at my own team, and I thought to myself, my team is also lacking motivation because they have no work. They're coming every day and sitting around not doing anything because we have no customers. We keep the place open, and we were not, my restaurant, the Fire Grill, was not known for this great place in terms of delivery. So we had to change it around, think about doing something which was useful. So the opportunity presented itself to help our community and to reach out. And I thought we must do something, but I didn't have the money to do it, right? So I put out a call to my support network, my friends and family and colleagues and clients, and said, this is what I want to do. If you want, and no forcing at all, if you want, please join me. Right? And it started off with 200 ringgit and another 200 ringgit, and somebody put 100 and 1,000, and somebody put 500, and another person put 300. And then we had a couple of institutional investors as such who were interested in coming in and helping us. So one organization gave us 4,000 ringgit, another organization gave us 7,000 ringgit. And you know what? Lo and behold, 62,630 ringgit and 10,003 meals going out to really proper audited organizations where the food went out and every single donor has received a little message saying that this is where your money went. This was an opportunity, but most importantly, the biggest thing through all of that was serving the community. But the second biggest thing was the fact that my team was 100% busier than ever, trying to prepare 300 to 400 meals a day, sometimes 200, sometimes 300 meals a day, 400 meals a day. That was an enormous amount of work for them, but they did it with so much happiness because it was pure altruism. And if you look for an opportunity in a crisis, and of course, you might not be in the same boat as me in my particular restaurant. And of course, I wasn't in the same boat with EQTD Consulting, my consulting company, or my comedy club, or the other things that I do. But you can find some opportunity somewhere where if you look and if you seek and if you continue to keep your motivation going, this can only happen if you have an open mind, when you are open to suggestions, when you can identify. That is only when you are open to suggestions, you will be able to identify ways and means to actually help yourselves, serve the people around you, and also to lead the people around you. Right? During this crisis, now that we're coming out of it in the recovery mode, broaden your observation. Stop being myopic in terms of how you run your businesses, right? You have been running really well for the last whatever number of years, right? But the world has changed, consumer preferences have changed, governmental rules and regulations are changing every single day. Today you can do this, tomorrow you can't, day after tomorrow you can. We're all in the same situation. Don't moan and whine about the conditions that you see in the world right now. This is our reality. Accept that uncertainty is the only certainty in the near future. So broaden your horizons. It's important for you to broaden your horizons, broaden your outlook, and respect all the different opinions that you are bound to receive in your organization itself. There will be people who will come and tell you that you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Don't brush it off immediately. That's very, very important. Don't brush it off. If you are a negative leader, right, you will only see the difficulties. And that's the danger. If you resonate constantly in a state of fearfulness, or in a state of know-it-all, or in a state of I know best, right, then you will only see difficulties every single time people say something to you. And you will always be able to find difficulties, find faults with other people's perspectives, because you may not be a negative person, but you may be a negative leader because you've already predetermined that what you do and what you say and how you want to run your business or how you want to lead your corporation or your company is the best way to do it. Now is the time for you to stop that, put that in the back burner. I mean, you can't change your personality overnight, I know, right? But what you can do is make a conscious decision. So every time somebody is giving you an idea and your impulsive instinct is to say, no, that's not that's not the way, right? Or I've tried this before, don't say it. Because it's not only that you want good ideas to come out or new perspectives to come out, but you also want to give the people around you the feeling that they are in a conducive environment where they can actually express themselves. Because through all, you will find that every 9 suggestions that come from your team, you might not want to work on them. But in that, there will be 1 or 2 or 3 gems that you can actually, for every 10, 9 might be completely wrong. But there might be 1 that you can work with. For every 10, there might be 7 which are wrong. But 3 might be something that you can work with. But that 3 only will come if you don't shut people down right away. So don't be a negative leader in that sense. That's important. This is not about you as a person. This is about you as a leader. Many of you might be lovely people out there. I don't know you. You might be fantastic people, right? But remember, ask yourselves, I might be a good person in my normal life, but am I a negative leader? And a negative leader will only see difficulties and will find fault in the perspectives of others. So stop doing that. Literally, stop doing that. Stop yourself. No, I won't do it. You know what I mean? Hard, but try. That's the important thing, because that will help you manage your organizations a lot better. Turn it around. Focus on what little good that people offer. Everybody has something good to offer. No matter how terrible someone is, they have something absolutely good to offer. Excuse me, I'm going to wet my throat a little bit. All right. Good coffee then. I hope you have a good coffee as well while listening to me. Turn around and look at what people have to offer you and find the good in it. Find the nobility of their viewpoint. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes ideas will be quite bad, but don't diss the person, don't disrespect the person, don't diss the idea before you appreciate and understand the nobility of their viewpoint, because they might have that capacity at that time only to generate that particular idea, right? But it's coming from a good place. Understand it's coming from a good place because we're all in this together. No one person is, immune to this. Right? Very few people are immune to the COVID-19 crisis. All of us are literally struggling, except if you are in an essential service, or if you run a food delivery service, or if you run a car sharing or carpooling organization. Right now, there are few people who are doing well during this particular pandemic, but the rest of the world, and of course, if you're a salaried employee, you are safe to an extent. You don't know when you're going to be let go of, but you are safe to an extent because for this month, last month, and at a push, you get a furlough scheme or a 20% reduction in salary or whatever, right? Accept the nobility of people's ideas and resonate positively all the time. That's concentrating on other people's viewpoint. As a leader, that's important for you to do. Don't be stuck with this mindset of being fixed. You can't afford to still be stuck with a one-track mind or a business as usual attitude. And there will be some people out there right now who have thought to themselves, I just carry on, I'll plow through, I'll fight my way, I'll do it. Good. But always remember that you must have an all-inclusive view to be able to get in front of the crisis. And the drama right now for all of us is to run in front of the crisis. Crisis is there. It's not going to go. It's happening. It has been happening. It will happen. And I think the bigger fallout will come even as we recover, because it's now no longer, while we may, I just realized I'm writing my column for tomorrow, and I wrote it this morning, I wrote this particular sentence, while we may have all become experts and mastered the skill and art of social distancing, the fallout now is affecting our wallets and will continue to affect our wallets. So it will affect us in economic terms, and we can see that, right? So we need to get in front of the crisis. Just a few days ago, I was on an online leadership coaching session with a company director, and he was lost. A fairly large company, 800 people working for him. So maybe he's still an SME, but 800 people working for him in about 12 or 13 locations around Malaysia. And he was lost. He said, I'm losing so much of business, and I don't know how to turn it around. I know what I need to do, but I'm struggling to turn it around. And I said, the first thing he needs to do is to be able to see and identify those who he can rely on, and those who can handle the post-MCO, post-lockdown trauma. What kind of people do you have in your organization? Right? So first is look at the people that you have. There will be some people who will be completely adept at making changes, have got the agility to change, have got the ability to look at the crisis, look at the uncertainty, the ensuing uncertainty, and not panic, but come up with good ideas and good viewpoints. But then there'll be others. There'll be others who will struggle with that. There'll be others who will be so dead in the water, literally, and also filling their minds up with only their problems and troubles at this moment. And you need to be able to, as leaders of your organization, need to be able to separate, the people who can and the people who can't. Because the people who can, even though they might be difficult, they might not be performing to the best of their abilities, or they might not even have been fantastic employees in the past. Right now, you've seen that they can, they have the wherewithal, right? The inner strength to manage this and go give them extra attention, and make it extra attention to the point of view, from the point of view of actually lifting them up and trying to get them to do more of what they're doing. The people who can't, you have to have difficult conversations with them. You either train them or trade them. That's really what we have left to do. Train them, meaning institute some performance improvement plan for the people that are not performing or finding themselves difficult. Don't just concentrate on the hard skills, concentrate on the soft skills, because we've realized over the last 3 months, who cares about your hard skills? Who cares whether you're an accountant or not? Who cares whether you're an engineer or not, right? What people care is your ability to communicate, to talk, to connect with people, to talk to yourself out of the crisis that you had because you needed a certain sense of, upliftment and buoyancy in your life, right? So for all those of you who never paid a lot of attention on soft skills, this is the time to realize that you need that, because the people who perhaps weren't performing before are actually performing much better in this particular crisis because they have the emotional intelligence, right? The EQ, not just the IQ of doing things. So that's what we need to do as organizations. It is important to effectively engage your employees right now. I told this company director, go down and speak to people. I mean, you do it on Zoom, do it on Microsoft Teams or whatever the kind of online platforms that you choose to use, right? You need to be able to talk to them. And when you talk to people, I also recently told another managing director, group CEO of an organization, that he gets onto Zoom every single morning and talks to all his top management team. He's got about 35 of them. He goes in and spends 2 hours every morning from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, pumps straight in and says, you need to do this, do this, do this, do this. And after about 3 or 4 weeks of the MCO, I asked him, I said, boss, sir, Datuk, whatever, do you say good morning and do you ask people how they feel? And he said, oh, bro, why do I need to ask that? Why do I need to? They all work for me. I'm the CEO, group CEO of this organization. And then he realized after a while that actually, I told him, just try it now. Try it tomorrow. So the first thing is he spent about 15 minutes at 9 o'clock, and so starting his meeting as per normal online, he had a quick chat with him. He said, how are you all doing? Is everything all right? How are you performing? Are you okay? How are you feeling about stuff? And he called me at the end of that evening and said that there was a different energy in my management team today, simply because I engaged my employees, engaged my team more sincerely, genuinely, honestly. That's something that we need to do. Many leaders fail at doing this because they're concentrating on firefighting, and lurching from one crisis to another right now. That's essentially what's happening to everybody. This time, right now, through the crisis, you need to identify talent. You need to gauge capabilities of people. You need to find new opportunities and be prepared for the future. So take these 4 things together. Get yourself or your next in command or your co-director or somebody next to you and divide the jobs up, right? Identifying talent and gauging capabilities is one job. That's vital. Somebody needs to be doing that. Finding new opportunities and being prepared for the future, somebody else needs to be doing that. Now, if you are unfortunate that if you're the only director of the company, the main leader or the CEO of the organization doing everything, then you need to be able to 25% of your time looking at talent, 25% of your time looking at ability and finding different ways of doing that, identifying talent, seeing how people perform, how people have performed over the last 3 months. If you were observant, you will know, you will have data right now, how people will, how people have managed themselves through this crisis. If you have data right now and if you have analyzed it, you will also be able to gauge capacity and capability. Finding new opportunities, close the door, think, get online, look at people, talk to every friend you know who is going through this similar, find out what, and there'll be some who will share with you and some who won't, some who will be selfless and some who will be selfish. Don't bother about that. Keep on trying, right? And that way you find new opportunities and you begin to prepare for a much more interesting future. At this time of crisis, you can't be circumspect about your own passions for your career, your own passion for your career and for your business or your business. You have to engage, you have to do everything that you need to do. And most of all, you're going to change that mindset and stop worrying. It won't get far if you don't trust yourself to take kind of, dramatic steps and define new strategies at the moment. I don't know what strategies, it depends on what business you're in, but there are strategies for every business out there. Either you find ways and you break through barriers and figure out ways to go through, or you stand where you are and pivot and move to something else. Try something different, right? Something that you've probably never done before. And you need to do this. I mean, there's so many examples. History is peppered with organizations that have figured out how to do it. I can do the textbook stuff and tell you that you should look at Fuji, you should look at Kodak, Agfa, Konica and Fuji, and how Kodak died and Fuji repurposed itself. I mean, go read it. You'll figure it out. You don't need me to tell you that, right? If you're a good director, go look at the Kodak story and how they failed. Because they Fuji pivoted. And if you, in Malaysia itself, you look at Samsung Corning Precisions, there's an incredible case study about Samsung Corning Precisions, which is based in Sarawak, right? How they were using Corningware to make cathode ray televisions for years and years and years, and then nobody wanted to buy cathode ray televisions because we all moved to first LED and then plasma or whatever. And there was this kind of need, and then they pivoted right away. They pivoted and said, you know what, we'll do something else. I don't know if they're successful now, but at the time when I was working with them, they had pivoted and gone into doing solar panels, for example, and they were doing incredibly well, right? And it's essentially taking dramatic steps and defining new strategies born out of a crisis, right? And that requires you not to be not to be consumed and subsumed by your problems at the moment, but actually allowing yourself the ability to get out, think about new things, right? And for that, you need to explore. You need to explore. If you're so worried, if your 24-hour day is spent worrying about things, you ain't going to be exploring anything. You ain't going to be discovering anything new, right? Because you can't change positively without exploring and discovering. When you explore and discover, when you tap into the reserves of every experience you've had over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and some of you have been in business for a long time, you'll be able to see hidden obstacles. If you haven't been in business for a long time, right now is the time for you to find mentors, people who are retired, people who are older, 60, 70-year-olds, who are not working and got savings and sitting at home. Call them and say, like, he used to be a company director. You used to be someone who is pushing and stuff like that. So like, how is it that you became better? How is it that you thought that you navigated the complexities of your career? Those people will freely give advice to you, tell you good things, and it's up to you to discern whether it's workable for you or not. Personally, I cannot stress this more. I have grown most in times of crisis in relation to my life and also my professional skills. That's really important, absolutely important for me. Are you learning about yourselves, right? Are you learning about your colleagues? Do you know which team member is complacent and who can be relied upon to take ownership? I mean, ask yourself the question, are you being complacent or can you be relied to take ownership? You'll have to face your own fears of change and learn to embrace them. That's tough right now. And that's the mindset to adopt at the moment. And that mindset begins with that purpose drive that you have. If you don't have that purpose drive at the beginning, because you understand it, because you're so vested and invested in fear, and that's debilitating you, you need to turn that around. Turn that around from actually being fearful. And, Nelson Mandela said, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the ability to overcome it. We're all afraid, okay? No matter what you say and how much bravado you show at the moment, everybody's a little bit kind of nervous and anxious and some downright fearful about what's going to happen to their businesses, right? And courage here is not that you don't have fear. Oh, I'm fearless. That's all talk, right? There's no such thing. I always find people I'm fearless. What do you mean you're fearless? Everybody's got some fears, right? What we need to do is confront the fear and figure out a way to go around, get in front of it, get around it, just like getting in front of the crisis, right? That's what we need to do. And I believe, and I strongly believe, I have experience in doing this, that you don't need to be an entrepreneur to adopt an entrepreneurial attitude. Some of you corporate directors out there, you would have got your jobs because you are excellent technocrats. Some of you are startup merchants. Some of you are business owners that have struggled from little enterprises and grown them to SMEs, grown them to even larger organizations. But I whenever I talk about this to some people, especially people who are in employment, they tell me, "Oh, Shankar, I'm not really an entrepreneur. I don't have the entrepreneurial skill. I don't particularly enjoy entrepreneurial skills as well. I don't like that. I like my life the way it is." But actually, I'm not asking you to become an entrepreneur. That's the important thing that I want to remind everyone. I just want you to adopt an entrepreneurial. I'm just suggesting that you should adopt an entrepreneurial attitude. That's the mindset that you need to take on right now. And an entrepreneurial mindset is to be bold. I'll be bold. I'll test everything. But it's like, what have you got to lose? You're already losing a lot. right? And you know, you make calculated, mitigated risks. Think very carefully and push your risk, your threshold for risk a bit further. In fact, a lot further than what you used to be before, right? Be impactful. So everything that you do, you need to think about the impact internally, impact for your shareholders, impact for your consumers, public at large, impact in terms of relevance. So impact for your shareholders, of course, that's always the back of our mind. And it's important that we make money for ourselves and make money for the organizations that are the board of directors. That's important. But also think about the impactfulness for the staff, the people that work in your organization, because managers, even as a director, you're not getting paid for the work that you do. You are getting paid, you are getting profits for the performance of your team, right? So only when you are impactful with your team and create structures for them and give them opportunities and manage all the fissures that are taking place inside the organization, the cracks, patch them over, figure out best ways of bringing them together, that's when they perform. So you need to spend a tremendous and inordinate amount of time trying to manage your team, if you have a team, because most SMEs got 10 people, 5 people, 8 people. These are important people for you. Most startups, young startups that are manned by, it's a very sexist word, man. What it means is that are run by a group of young people between the ages of 20 25, you'll always find that they bandy together. They don't, they have a fairly flat organization. Everybody comes together and tries their damnedest to actually make things work. The bootstrap, I mean, these are words that you and I know a common parlance that, startup people like to use. But basically, it's coming together and putting everything aside and doing it and pulling yourself together and saying, I will take a hit because I believe in you. I trust you, right? And I appreciate that you will offer me a pathway out. You means the organization, you means the company, you means the leader. Being fearless in creating very large goals. That's what we need to be doing. Calculated risks, accepting uncertainty, learning best to use your limited resources, influencing people around you. Do you know how important it is for enhanced communication skills during this crisis? Half the time, if you are a terrible communicator as a leader or a director, and you're only sitting there because you started the company, or because your parents started the company, and because you were handed the company in a silver platter, and you've never learned communication skills effectively to communicate with the people who work for you and who are making you the results, producing the results for yourself, you are not going to be influenced. You are just living, you're not going to be influenced the people around you. So influencing skills is extremely important right now. And you can only influence people around you, from your clients to your stakeholders to the people who work in your organization, if you have clarity, if you have consistency, if you have courtesy, of course, but most importantly, if you have something that they need. What is it that people need right now? You have to ask yourself in your business, what do people need? That's the influencing task that you have. Creating an environment where your team is willing to push themselves for an idea. Right now, a lot of pushing themselves is for an idea. It's very, very hard. I mean, my experiences over the last 3 months, I can't push my team because I can't promise them money. I can't promise them results, but I can promise them a very sharp idea or an ideal. The moment I can promise them an ideal situation and say that this is where we're going to get to, and they begin to buy into that, then you will find that they're able to push themselves and try a whole range of things. Just as you need to keep your motivation going and increase your buoyancy, you must then take that ability and give it to the people around you, and help them actually push through an idea and break their own barriers of fear. That's important. So, ladies and gentlemen, my key takeaways for all of you is observe and seek opportunities, engage with your employees, and go and do a little bit of reading on what the entrepreneurial mindset requires you to do as an individual, right? That's vital for all of you. Thank you so much. It's 10:50, I think, 10:45 to 10:50, and I am available here now to answer any questions that you all have. Hi, Nadia.
Hello, good. Sorry about the hair, but
No
yes,
problem.
thank you very much.
Sorry
Thank you
about my
very
hair.
much.
I don't have the problem.
Thank you very much, Shankar, for that fantastic presentation. As I mentioned, sort of like at the beginning of all of this, I do think mental fortitude is very, very important in
Very
times
much
like
so.
this, because like you said at the beginning, wasn't the first instinctive urge just to curl up in a fetal position and cry.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even for the people who are best placed in society, who lead organizations, because there's a lack of clarity in terms of what we can do, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel for the first few weeks. Everybody's going, oh my God, how long is this going to last? Is this going to be extended? And in our government also, in a sense, did a good thing, in a sense, did a kind of dodgy thing by extending it every 2 weeks, every time. So every time we thought it was going to be over, it was pulled off for another 2 weeks. So by the time the second or third time came along, we thought, like, can't trust these fellas anymore. Okay, they might extend it further. Right? That's how we
Yes.
all operated. It literally, even in our own personal domains, we okay, should I? That's why every time just before the Prime Minister made an announcement, every shopping complex had like queues of 50 people standing outside because you didn't know whether this was going on or not. So that's basic iteration, simple livelihood, right? And from a business point of view, from an entrepreneurial point of view, from a company directional point of view, so it was a nightmare because you didn't know what to
It
do.
was
Right.
massively. Yeah, exactly. You can't, because the thing about business planning is just that, it's business planning. So how
Absolutely.
do you plan for something that you don't know, whether it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Absolutely.
And as the cases go, I suppose in a way they did it because you didn't know how the cases were going and he was taking it in that sense. But yes,
I think it was prudent for the government to take that particular stand without frightening everyone in one go, because that would have upset market sentiments, that would have made things very volatile, even more volatile than us. But from a personal point of view, as an owner of 6-7 businesses, I didn't know what to do. For a
yeah,
while, I had to sit and, like, literally, like what you say, curl up into a fetal position and cry myself to sleep. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And think
yeah,
about all the
exactly.
60, and you also think about the people who are working for you. I had 60 people working. I have 60 people working for me, and I was responsible for all their salaries, their partners, their children, and basically their life. And suddenly, I found myself going like, oh, why am I doing this with so many people? Do I need this number of people or not? So you have all these questions churning around inside you. When I decided that this is not the way, this cannot be the way. Being invested and focused only on the trouble can't be the way. I need to change my internal mental state of vibration, and that's
Okay.
what I did.
All right. And that feeds very nicely into actually our first question that we have from Dato Alia, because Dato mentions that there's a lot of mental anguish out there. And as you mentioned, in need of funds, families to feed, the
Yep.
negatives, the youngsters. What is the first steps that they can take to help themselves?
Okay.
Beyond just once you've done your crying, which I think for a lot of people hit around week 3,
Yep.
because first week, second week, you're like, I can do this. Then week 3 comes along, you realize I can't do this. So
Right.
what is the first step?
Well, the first step is that particular step, which is to process your hurt. Right? That's essential, and to process it well. Right? The processing of your hurt becomes an important part of what you do in terms of how you perform later. Processing your hurt takes 2 iterations. One is, this is not my fault. Okay, this literally, COVID-19. I single-handedly wasn't responsible for COVID-19, right? And
Yes.
how the world reacts to this. So that's the first thing that we must take, right? So that mitigates the difficulty to some extent, because it's really not my fault. Now, the second part of that is, what was really my fault? What is really my fault is that prior to March the 18th, I was a bit of a slacker. Prior to March the 18th, I didn't save enough money. Prior to March the 18th, I just coasted along, didn't really think about what I want to do for my future, and thought, I'll always be okay. Now, you have to take ownership of that right now. Instead of constantly just being, we all have difficulties and unfortunate, but it's an unfortunate circumstance, but it's not about saying, I should have done better. It is just acknowledging, I could have done better. In your mind, you don't need to tell anybody about that, because that a tectonic shift takes takes place in your head when you actually say, yeah, okay, because when the pandemic situation is, you have to give it away. It's not mine. It's out of my control. But my life, I have a semblance of control in my own life and some of the things that I do. So that will help you stop crying, firstly. And that changes that, that shift that I talked about, that kind of, really gargantuan shift in your mindset, changes from being a victim to, I am not going to be a victim and I'm going to find myself ways and means. So it's essentially, it is, and through all my experience over the last 30 years, I've always found that when I move away from feeling sorry for myself and start thinking about what I need to do actively, it's never easy, but right away, literally like magic, right away, an idea will form. And
yeah,
that idea,
I think that's the hardest part. I do get completely where you're coming from, but that is the hardest part. You said that we shouldn't think that of negatives always, or that things will be continued to normal, but it's hard to not think that way.
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's easy. I'll be foolish to say it's easy. It is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life. Your own brain, to manage your own mind, sorry, not the brain, but to manage your own mind is the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life.
Yeah,
a lot of people, it is literally the hardest thing. Your work is, you find, your marriage, your relationships, your kids, everything else, all dramas you'll manage somehow, right? You'll figure it. And I don't know how you'll manage it. You'll find a way to do it. But your mind is number one in terms of management, right? It's not about managing your finances. It's always about managing your mind, because if you don't manage your mind, no matter how much you earn, you'll still be broke, right? Because you and I know that, right? So that is the hardest thing to do. And that requires, as I said earlier, deliberate action. Deliberate action simply means that not allowing yourself to succumb to that neediness.
Okay.
Actually actively telling yourself, you could see it coming and you allow it into your life and go like, I really cannot do this. I really am going to die if I do this.
Yeah, following on to that, Francis Poe's question actually fits in very well, because she talks about how during crisis, leaders have so many balls to juggle, right?
Yep.
So many things and because of that, time is precious.
Yep.
Although I have to admit, during the MCO and its subsequent iterations, time seems to have lost a bit of barriers.
Yeah, we had a bit more time, yes.
Yes. But they mentioned it's not realistic to be energetic and listen to every single viewpoint.
No.
Just sometimes you just can't. No. What techniques can a leader adopt to sort of filter and prioritize what is important and critical?
The first thing you do is you have to accept that is a mindset issue, right? If you accept that you are going to have the mindset to be, you don't actually have to be energetic all the time. You don't actually have to listen to everybody all the time, but you need to send out that particular signal to the people who work in your organization that I am available. I will listen to all ideas. I will buoy myself and actually be completely conscious about not carrying a black face all around the office, for the lack of a better word, right? Because Malaysia people use the word blackface to me, which sounds a bit racist, but essentially the meaning of that we understand. That means to actually walk around being upset, being consumed, invested only in your troubles, and you'll find that your
pity party, essentially.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. The what is it called? Resting something face, I think. RBF or whatever.
Resting expletive face, correct.
Right, expletive face, that's the one, right? So if you walk around with that particular face around your organization as a leader, you will immediately preclude ideas from being generated, because people won't feel the need. And also, if you walk around, if as a leader you walk around with the world consuming your troubles, people around you, especially if they have affection for you, will go like, I shouldn't disturb him right now. I shouldn't disturb her right now. I don't want to go and number her with a whole bunch of other ideas. And you second guess yourself along the way. Now, alternatively, if you do that in your own cubicle, in your own space, in your own room, and you cry yourself senseless when you're alone, and then you come out and put a different face on, you will immediately find the energy levels in an organization shifts. And I am a firm believer of organizational energy. And you can see
the good morning thing, right? Just saying good morning.
Just saying good morning, just going to people and saying like, you're right. Are you all right? Are you okay? I'm around. You need anything, come and talk. I am around. You need anything, must be genuine, right? But at the same time, if 100 people come and say, I got something to talk to you about, you must look at them and you must smile and say like, I do have things to do. I do mean that I will be available for you, but can you just give me 10 minutes while I finish this? You know what? I'll give you, and that's when you make a decision. And the question that Francis asked, Francis, right? How do you make the how do you discern who is it that you want to listen to? You should spend the last 3 months, Francis, observing who can actually, who has the wherewithal to manage this crisis, who has ideas, who's, and who's a slacker, who's complacent along the way, right? So complacency, you don't have as much time for people who are complacent right now. And you don't want to be rude to them because you really need them to buck up and figure out a way. You want to tell them, I'll find time. So every single day, identify 30 minutes where you just meet all the slackers in your organization. You know what I mean? That's all you do. But all the high performers, the people who are actually helping your business manage well right now, give them the time, give them, stop whatever you're doing. Whatever you're doing is not as important as making sure they know and have direction and continue to support you. Because as I said, Francis, you don't get paid for what you do. You're not getting profits for what you do. You're getting profits for the performance of your team. That's what a company stands for. That's what a company is all about. So your highest value task right now is employee engagement, more than anything else. Make sure that, every additional squeeze out time. I don't know what your life is like, right? And how you manage your life. But if you sit back and do some action research on yourself and say, this is my work day, and I'm spending 12 hours, I'm spending 15 hours, carve out time, specifically carve out time to actually engage with people. And that's important right now.
I do think that is massively important. I think a lot of companies don't do it enough.
They don't. Actually, you know what, Nadia, I don't wish to be disrespectful, but in Malaysia, we have organizational leaders who really, literally don't care about that. And I keep telling them all the time, you gotta stop. You're dealing with a different group of people. You're dealing with, a lot of people in their 50s and, a lot of organizational leaders in their 50s were brought up by people who are now 80 or 90 years old, because that's when they started work. The baby boomer generation and the golden generation before that, they led different kind of lifestyles in terms of how they manage their businesses. And these people learned from them, right? And some of them have the agility to actually jump a generation and a second generation, go back and figure out what works for these young people, what works for millennials, what works for late Gen X's and Gen Ys. Late Gen X's, people are born in 1978 and 79, have a completely different point of view of the world than people are born in 1960. And 1970 even 1971 and 72, my generation, I'm born in 1970, 71. That particular generation of the 79, we are in the same Gen X, but we are different. We straddle the different spectrum. So the biggest task for an organization, an organizational leader right now in this particular mindset that we all need to generate is to go and have a chat and figure out, who am I dealing with? What generation am I dealing with? What is important to these people? I have found the easiest generation to deal with during this crisis has been the Gen Ys and the millennials, because they understand that, they're willing to put their personal preferences aside and say, I'm going to ban you. Because the sense of ownership, I found it very difficult. I found it very hard with Gen X's and the older generation, because why should I take a pay cut? Why do you not have this? Why that's difficult? Why is the government not doing enough for me? These are the kind of questions. Neither is wrong, neither is right, but everybody has a different pressure point when you talk to them, and that's what you need to do as a leader.
Very, very much correct. We have time for maybe a couple more questions, but Jennifer Tien's questions I think is very interesting. She thanks you, says very inspiring. Can you talk a bit about the mindset for risk-taking and willingness to fail during unprecedented, uncertain times? I think that's a very good thing to touch on.
Yeah, I think we are all schooled not to fail. That's essentially our problem, because we grew up in an education system in this country that doesn't celebrate failure. We are sitting for exams all the time, and our parents, bless their souls and their hearts, they want the best for us, but they apply an inordinate amount of pressure on us to actually get 70, 80 marks, 90 marks. I've had my father's a university lecturer and a university professor and to boot an educational psychologist, but he'll get really upset with me if I get any marks less than 80 or 85. And I'll tell him, what are you upset about? I got an A, that's good enough. No, but you didn't get an A plus, A minus. So this translates itself to current modern living as well. We all live in our default setting is fear of failure, essentially, and that is also why every time a business plan is developed in I think the newer generation, the younger people who are starting business are beginning to acknowledge this. But by and large, a very sizable population of this country that writes business plans never thinks about what happens if this fails. When you write a business plan, you always write all the positive things and you come up with ideas and views and I will do this and that and everything else. But you never say what is that is a real, because every entrepreneur, every company director knows that there is a very, very large percentage of failure in everything that you do, but we don't plan for that. We don't think about what we're going to do, which is why we have no exit plans, which is why a lot of companies are struggling and so on. So I think the first thing is to learn to embrace failure, which means don't stigmatize failure. Right? There are two types of failure in an organization or in yourself. One is failure because you are just not trying and not doing.
Okay.
And one more is failure after you try and you try and you try. And we need to be able to separate these two out and eschew the failure for not trying, but pat people in the back when they tried and still failed. For example, if you remember, all of us remember when we were studying mathematics in Form 4, Form 5, when we get a problem-solving question, we will get the answer wrong, but the teacher will still give us 2 marks or 3 marks for the formula.
Working it out.
Working it out, right? And say if you did it right, you got the right answer, you'll get 10. Now that is a form of positive reinforcement, which is what we need when we are actually in organizations. So the attitude to take for failure is, if you're an organizational leader, always give latitude for people to fail. And always factor in a certain percentage of failure when you are planning. It is your expectation only as the leader, right? It is your personal expectation. So whenever I tell somebody in my organization to do something, I actually have to actively go, what if she fails? What if he fails? And how much of that failure will I accept? Because usually when your boss gives you something, there is no room for failure when he or she gives it to you, right?
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely
you
not.
always
Just go ahead,
feel,
do it.
and you bring it on yourself. Like you say, it's your sort of upbringing where you are taught that anything less than complete execution is not worth it.
Absolutely. And what we need to do is, we have a lot of corporate directors sitting out there, SME leaders and so on. You just need to cut your team some slack, man, right now, and actually embrace the concept of failure. Because number one, they're going through a massive psychological problem, right? Because of the whole crisis at the moment, not knowing what to do. That means the failure will get accentuated all the time. So every single thing they do, they'll be fearful because they might fail, right? So we need to manage that failure and allow, in a word, to answer your question, it's to learn and adapt to embracing failure, to give a little bit of leeway in every plan that you make for failure, which means every single time you come up with a business plan, every single time you come up with meeting minutes, every single time you give instructions to people as organizational leaders, factor in how many, 3%, 5%, 10% failure you're going to accept. The moment you do that, you'll be less harsh on people, which means you encourage them, just like that math teacher who gives you 3 points or 4 points out of 10 for trying.
I think that's a very good note to sort of end it on for today. But yes, it is all about mindset shifts.
Absolutely.
And different ways of dealing with it that we haven't done before. I think in unprecedented times, maybe this is the time to sort of break every convention you possibly ever held. At least for now.
Absolutely.
Anyway, with that, for that, thank you so much, Aka, for your presentation and the Q&A. Thank you to everybody who joined for their questions. I so apologize that we couldn't get to absolutely all of them, but thank you. I hope we covered most of the ground. And with that, we've come to the end of the webinar for today. Thank you again to everybody for participating, and thank you to our speaker for his great presentation. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Please use the survey link in the chat box next to you, or scan the QR code to provide your feedback and maybe sort of suggestions of topics of interest. There's a couple of other programs. There's another webinar for SMEs coming up next week, but there's other programs like Aspiring Directors Immersion Program, ICDM Affiliate Membership and Board Ready Screening, Director Sourcing and Placement Services. If any of that sounds of any interest to anybody, please watch this space. face or register your interest at development@icdm.com.my, or in fact, visit icdm.com.my. That is it for this session. It's been my pleasure to be your moderator. Everybody have a good day and stay safe out there.